Lori is not a leader of Chad's new church, the Church of the Firstborn. Lori so wants to testify of Jesus. You heard her on her podcast. She wants to tell the world how much she loves Jesus. She wants to tell you that she personally met him on more than one occasion. But is Lori a leader, or is she a follower of Chad? She so wants to be a leader, but she's not leading anyone. She's following Chad. She thinks Chad is following Jesus, but he's not. He's unfortunately being led by the storm. Not the first guy to be led by the storm.
Wow. That was from Lori Daybell's trial. You remember, though, no cameras, but we did have audio. Now the question will be, in Chad Daybell's trial, he wants cameras inside. He wants the world to see and hear everything that happens. What was interesting in that first trial, though, Lori Daybell was accused of kind of being the leader of this whole thing, and she's saying no, she was being led by Chad, and now it's Chad's turn at trial. It'll be interesting to see what prosecutors say at his trial, if they remain consistent in their argument. In the meantime, my friend, anchor Ted Rowlands, has more on the rise and fall of the so-called Doomsday Prophet.
Chad Daybell grew up in the LDS Church in Springfield, Utah. And according to Chad, in his teens, he became sort of a prophet.
The way he described it was that his veil was more open than it had been.
Daybell met his first wife, Tammy Douglas, while in college. He was a part-time grave digger. During their marriage, they would have 5 children. The couple also founded a book company through which Chad published many religious books.
I've recently released my autobiography entitled Living on the Edge of Heaven, where I tell more about my 2 near-death experiences.
Chad Daybell claimed he had visions of the future and heard a voice that guided him. He told followers he knew the end of the world was coming and that evil zombies were taking over some people's bodies.
Chad's been a very prolific author, so in the past, I would say a lot of his publications are very much in the mainstream, but it does seem that their trajectory seems to be taking them away from the kind of center where most people in the faith would have.
Chad would meet Lori Vallow in 2018. They had an affair, and she became a dedicated follower of his cult-like group. The next year, Chad's wife, Tammy, died in her sleep.
I begged her to go to the doctor because her heart was failing her. She was physically falling apart.
Chad is now charged with Tammy's murder. 2 weeks after her death, on November 5th, 2019, he and Lori were married. Within 7 months, Chad and Lori Daybell would both be jailed for the murders of her children and his wife. The remains of Lori's daughter, Tylee, and son, JJ, were found in Chad's backyard.
On behalf of Mr. Daybell, we will enter a plea of not guilty to all of the charges.
Think Tank back with us. Philip Dubé, Chad Daybell wants the world to see his trial. What does that tell you?
Well, it tells me a couple of things. He's a very astute guy. Obviously, if he loses and he's sentenced to death, he won't care. But let's say it's a hung jury or he's acquitted. He'll feel that he'll still have a hit parade out there of people, ralliers who are supporting him and truly believe in his innocence. So that's one strategy. The other strategy is I'm a little more of a pragmatist, and that is ignorance of the law, as you know, is never a defense to anything. I don't care if it's civil or criminal. But when you televise a trial and all the proceedings, it educates the public so that they're no longer ignorant in certain subjects. They can learn a lot from it, as opposed to be taken off guard when they're in legal hot water. And their defense is, well, gee, I didn't know that that was the law. And now they can learn a lot about the law of hearsay, conspiracy, homicide, and granted it's limited to that jurisdiction, but at least they will learn basic principles. And he is a bit of a pedagogue, if you will. He's very much into didactics, teaching and learning, and I think he wants that live studio audience to really learn from him and his trial. Just my 2 cents.
Now, Michael Sterling, every defendant has a defense. I've got to think his defense will be pointing the finger at the person, one of the people who's already been convicted of these murders, and her brother, who's dead. So I want you to take a listen, though. Do you think the defense will try to also get this jury to understand about the unique relationship between Lori Daybell and her brother, Alex Cox? Take a listen to Alex Cox's ex-wife talking about that relationship.
There was a lot of inappropriate sexual touching and things going on in the family, particularly between him and his sister.
So between Alex and Lori?
And Lori.
Okay. You kind of got me at a loss on this one. What do you consider inappropriate sexual touching?
Like they were simulating sex acts, and which is not normal to me for a brother and a sister. For example, he would pick her up and she'd wrap her legs around his waist, and he would kind of bounce her up and down on himself.
Okay.
In front of me, and they would moan and simulate sex acts. And I have brothers, and I would never act like that with one of my brothers.
Okay.
And his mom and dad talked about their sex life in front of us constantly, and it just kind of seemed to be a game for them.
Oh, the mom and dad didn't really object to it then, huh?
No, not at all. All of this was going on in the family, in front of everybody. They had no shame.
Michael Sterling, if the jury finds out about this and hears evidence like this, do you think that perhaps they might believe that it was Lori and Alex and Chad was perhaps their victim as well?
I mean, you've got to make the argument, right, Vinny? You've got to do anything to sow that reasonable doubt, that doubt based on reason that can exist in the mind of a fair and impartial juror, honestly seeking the truth, right? And if you can sow that doubt and say, look, Lori, Alex had this inappropriate relationship. And then I think, if I remember correctly, Vinny, there was other evidence that Lori basically controlled Alex. He would do anything for her. He would do anything to help her. And there was evidence that was testified to about how Lori had complete and utter control over Alex, including the fact that Alex, there was some speculation that Alex was the person, essentially that Alex was the one who I believe killed her ex-husband. But it was ultimately ended up in self-defense, if I remember correctly. But that the idea that if he would do that for her, right, kill her ex-husband, then it's possible that this was Lori and Alex's killing spree and that Chad was, disavowed of it. That's the argument that I anticipate his lawyers will make. Anything to sow that reasonable doubt.
Judge, looking at this relationship, brother-sister, he followed her everywhere. And it seems pretty clear from the evidence that he's the one actually committing the physical murders at the behest of either Lori or Lori and Chad. Is this what this trial is going to be about, this brother-sister relationship?
I think from the defense perspective, it's absolutely going to be a lot about the relationship between Lori and her brother, the kind of control that she in particular could exert over her brother and also over her husband. I think at the end of the day, for Chad's trial, it's more likely than not going to be my wife made me do it. And happy wife, happy life, right? And that perhaps includes even knowing about, if not being directly involved in, but knowing about perhaps what happened to her children, even though he's going to argue this did not happen at my hands, it happened at the hands of Lori and her brother. They concocted this, and I had absolutely nothing to do with it. The problem is this intertwined relationship, and the fact that Chad's going to have, I think, a very difficult time trying to explain to a jury how he walks away with this with clean hands and is not as culpable for these murders as his wife has already been convicted of. Now, I'm not suggesting that, he does not have the likes of Mr. Dubé and Mr. Sterling on his dream team of defense, because that's exactly what he's going to need in order to walk out of this courtroom.
He may. We'll see how that all...
I think he's going to struggle. I think he's going to struggle.